Welcome back. My guest is Business Leadership South Africa CEO Bonang Mohale. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm happy we are now dealing with the problem that is confronting us. People follow the proceedings of the Zondo Commission on State Capture, right? Revelations are made there. But I never hear of any arrests being made. What is your take? What is your view of that? Because people think, well, the intention is to whitewash what happened previously so that the looting, the corruption can continue without the media or the public raising any concerns.
I think we are very emboldened by what the president continues to reiterate, that this is going to be a country of laws, not of men. And it's very clear. He says it's clear, fair, enforced rules. In the past, we have been failing on enforcement, like we have been failing on execution. Very long on plans, very little on doing. So the president is saying, first, I'm going to reshuffle my cabinet, 23 changes, 10 ministers gone. Secondly, I am going to look at enforcing the laws of this country. People must go to jail. If I miss you here, this will catch you. Lastly, he's saying, but the size of my cabinet is too big. 20 during Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela's period, 23 in Thabo Mbeki, 37 in the current administration. So if you miss the first two, the third one at least will catch you there. We support the president in his clarity that state capture must be defeated and rooted out. Bribing, stealing, and cheating, whether it's done by the private sector or the public sector, must be followed through with the singularity of purpose. And again, people must go to jail, especially to be exemplary about 2 or 3 people. Lastly, he's also saying, as we defeat state capture, bribery, stealing, and corruption, let's start imbuing ourselves with a new culture. And he's calling all of us to action with his tumamena. All of us are getting our loins in anticipation and wringing our hands and saying, how can I be helpful? How can I be useful? Maybe to ensure that as business, we come to the party quickly on finalizing the Mining Petroleum Resources Development Act, because this thing has been kicked down the road for the last 8 years. Maybe as business to come to the party and say, on the Mining Charter 3, let's be clear about this 10% free carried interest and about this trickle dividend that is supposed to go to the community, so that in a matter of days, not the 6 years it has taken.
Matter of days?
In a matter of days.
Yeah.
So that there's an announcement rather than the years that it has taken. Lastly, he's also saying, maybe what we can do, even in intractable things, where we are trying to bring regulatory certainty and policy stability, let's make sure that the entire economic cluster is coordinated and aligned, and it speaks with one message, like MITA in Japan and Temasek in Singapore. One voice of the economic cluster, so that we can really increase business confidence, but also consumer confidence. Lastly, he's very clear to say it all starts with ethical leadership that gives us good policies, improves both business and consumer confidence. It becomes easier to attract foreign direct investment and retain it, so that the economy grows. When the economy grows, it's easier to start talking about job-absorbing type of growth, and we create
well, investment, which is great, but it's foreign investment. In South Africa, we learned that the same business community, right, is now on an investment boycott of sorts, standstill. I've seen a figure of 1.4 trillion or so being mentioned to be sitting on the books of big companies and not invested in this economy. Is that true? And if that's the case, why are businesses and the investment community of South Africa not investing in this economy?
So first of all, to try and puncture this inflated fallacy, we embarked on an independent Intellidex report to say, are we really on investment strike? And it came back emphatically to say, no, but there is cash hoarding because this is cyclical. One need only to look at the skyline of Sandton and see how it is being fundamentally transformed. That's private business. The Sasol head office, the Discovery headquarters, the Weber Wenzel, the Werkmans. You can see that business is really investing. Lastly, the president has set the country a target of $100 billion in 5 years. That's 20 billion per annum. As we speak, he's already banked 35 billion. It shows that he's a working, delivering president, and he will crush this target and smoke it. We have gone to our members and say, as the president says, 100 billion foreign direct investment, it would be wonderful to match him with a direct domestic investment. Because nobody comes from China and say, we are going to invest in your country, and they call Minister of Trade and Industry, Rob Davis, and say, here's 100 billion. They go to projects and say, business, are you building a pipeline? Are you building a railroad that will move the coal? But that's where they're going to invest. Yeah, so we need to front it as business and lead it.
But here's another challenge to you, right? As business leadership, SA, and the business community overall. It is not inclusive. Everything seems to be working at the top or in the environment of big business, and smaller emerging businesses, SMEs, are not been given a fair share to participate, right? It looks like it's an economy of the elites. Big organized business and government, together with unions for that matter, and the rest of everybody else, the 54% youth that you mentioned being unemployed, and the rest of everybody else seems to be out there on their own.
That is why, as Business Leadership South Africa, we are supporting the two transformative proposed amendments. First, the proposed amendments on the Competitions Commission that looks at this notion of economic concentration. Secondly, we are saying, we know that big business does not create jobs in large numbers, but small and medium enterprises do. So at the moment, we're sitting at about 16% of new jobs created in SMEs. Our BRICS counterparts, this number is north of 60 percentage points. We are now saying we'll invest in small and medium enterprises, we'll invest in senior black executives so that they've got the skills to be able to help these SMEs, but also so that it becomes possible for them to run the top 5 listed entities on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange out of the 400 that are listed. Lastly, when the president says, you know, jobs need to be created, we say we are going to lead by example. This afternoon, he was very clear to say, let's avoid job losses and this notion of joblessness at all costs. But if jobs are to be lost because it's unavoidable, like in the case of SABC, make sure that you retool, that you give them new pathways, that these are the people that can still have some economic activities. SAB many years ago embarked on an owner-driver scheme. At Shell, the 27 drivers have just been given 15 cars to start their own chauffeur service company called Lokiwe. They are owners, they are managers, they've got a trust. So you can see there's economic activity. When companies think creatively about job losses and they put systems and processes in place, this monster of 27 unemployment can be defeated. Lastly, when we talk about SMEs and you ask them, what do you need the most? You'll think they say money. No, they are saying these big businesses must give us access to their value chain. Yeah, because that's where more than 40% of the economic activity happens. Yes. And that's where the reluctance has been. Secondly, they're saying we need skills so that we know the difference between income and cash. We don't eat stock money.
Yes.
Only in the bottom 5 do they say access to finance. So business must lead in bringing about a revolution.
Will business walk the talk? Is it ready now? You are the CEO.
That's why I think we are imploring our members to come up with a new behavior, demonstrable, palpable, to say we are a patriotic business, we are a conscientious capital. We are going to put into effect this notion of shared value so that it is business that says we must pay our workers a decent wage so that they can afford the goods and the products that we produce, because if they don't, there's a problem. It should be business that says one of the biggest challenges confronting boards today in their oversight and governance responsibility is to ensure that corporate decision-making is not only up to the whims of the shareholders, but it is also taking into consideration the broader stakeholder community and also the commitments made by the executives.
Here's another point now, which we haven't touched on, and it's been raised generally across the board, including within business, that there's no policy certainty generally in South Africa. So many potential investors and business people who want to come and do business in South Africa, they do not understand what's happening. And a good example of that is on the question of land, this expropriation of land without compensation. Is there going to be any certainty in that regard in terms of how that is going to work? Who's going to be granted land? Who should apply? Who benefits? Whose land is going to be expropriated?
So first, we are the only country in the world outside of China that for 24 years has the same ANC-led government. That's stability. Same set of policies. That is stability. Our problem has been on implementation. Secondly, land is not only central to the struggle of African people, but they've been at the receiving end of land expropriation without compensation. The 1913 Land Act was the 10th expropriation without compensation. There have been 5 more since then. Each time the government gives a license to a mining house, as per the Mine Petroleum Resource Development Act, the surface rights are lost, mostly to African people, and they get relocated absolutely without any compensation. So we support it, because if we don't deal with the issue of land reform, which is the agenda, not just expropriation without compensation. And there are 3 elements. In the first instance, it's about restitution. It says land that belongs to African people, where they used to be self-sufficient, agrarian, not just smallanyana farmers, was forcibly taken with no compensation. They need to be restored to their original position, hence restitution. The second is about land redistribution. 90% of the population is squeezed in 13% of the land. It's not sustainable. It needs to be redistributed fairly and equally. Lastly, it talks about land development. For what purpose and who? In land development, that's where Section 25 is absolutely clear. And it talks about property rights. And in particular, 3A addresses the issue of security of tenure. Lower down, as you read that, it says, when conditions of fair and equitable have been fulfilled, compensation can be down to 0. The Constitution as it stands today is more than adequate to deal with the issue of land expropriation without compensation. Therefore, for us, the braces and the handrails, the checks and balances are in the fact that you need a 2/3 majority to be able to amend this constitution. But we support the president in the responsible manner in which he introduced this. First of all, he took control of it and ownership, took it out of the hand of the populists, pulled the rug under their feet by saying, I will locate it in the multi-party Constitutional Review Committee that will listen to all and sundry, including the ANC. Secondly, he said it must be done by fulfilling the 3 conditions: economic growth, agricultural output, and food security. And for us, he said it's going to be done in an orderly and constitutionally sound manner. But most importantly, he told us what it is not. It's not Zimbabwe land grab or Venezuela land grab.
It's not going to be that.
He said categorically.
And you seem to be convinced that the president is onto something here, and you were there with him, so we take your word for it. And thank you very much for having been our guest. Bonang Mohale, thank you very much, sir, the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. And after the break, we'll be taking a closer look at the recently released crime statistics, so stay with us.